Hello everyone, this is Jason from Primetime Aquatics, and in this video we are going to be showing you some very large display tanks from both South America and Lake Tanganyika in Africa. What's so cool about these display tanks is they're monstrous, and because they are so large, we're going to see some fish that we would normally see in the home aquaria or in a pet store, but at their full size, their maximum potential. It's going to be a really cool thing to see, so stay tuned. So here we are back at the Cleveland Aquarium. This is an awesome place. In this room, we're going to be looking at the large South American setups that they had and one Lake Tanganyikan display tank. This tank that we're looking at here is a South American tank. I have no idea how many thousands of gallons this tank was, but it was quite large. Here you see a really cool school of silver dollars. This is a jigsaw cat, and this thing, as you can see, is well armored, and it was really big. They can get up to 3 feet. I would say this one was about 30 inches, maybe slightly larger. But you look at this fish and the heavy armor that it has, and you think about the environment that it comes from, and it would absolutely need that kind of heavy armor to protect itself from predators. Here once again is a large school of red hook silver dollars, and usually in a home aquarium, if you can get these things to 5 or 6 inches, they're looking pretty good. These ones were much larger than that, probably at least 8 inches, and very thick bodied. Really cool to see them in a large school. Again, they like it that way. Here we've got what I would consider to be probably a rather old Feste cichlid, red terror, kind of hanging out by himself. Pretty cool looking fish. They get some really nice looking colors. They're pretty aggressive. Here you can see this is the only one in this rather large, many thousands of gallon tank, and it's just kind of hanging out. It's really not doing much, but I really like that school of silver dollars. And here we've got the Leperinus. Now, a lot of times people buy this fish in a pet store, and they are maybe just a couple inches, super cute, look awesome, not realizing they're going to get to a foot long. And when they do, in the average home aquarium, they can get a little bit aggressive, but in this fish tank, they are doing great. Here's a couple of Severum. These were very large. Mine are somewhere in the neighborhood of 7 or 8 inches, and these fish were quite a bit larger. I suspect this is probably a pair because they weren't fighting, they weren't chasing each other around like a couple males will often do. But again, what was so cool about a tank this large is the fact that you can get the fish to grow to their full potential. And we saw that in the Asian aquarium displays in the previous video. I will put a link to that in the upper right hand corner, as well as in the description below. If you haven't seen that video, check that out. There were a lot of really cool fish in that one as well. But here, once again, when you've got a tank that's thousands of gallons, the fish can grow to their full potential, and that's not something we often see in the home aquarium. Even when we have relatively large tanks, 125, 150 gallon, maybe even a 220, this one's thousands of gallons, and so you get a very different look. There is that ripsaw cat once again, just an absolutely enormous fish, just kind of stood by the glass the whole time. Here we have another view of the red terror along with that massive giant group of red hook silver dollars, and it was just mesmerizing to look at, having so many fish in one area just kind of hanging out. And silver dollars are really cool fish. When you can grow them to their full potential, it's even better. Here is a really cool fish. This was a Midas cichlid. I just did a species profile on them. I will put that in the upper right hand corner as well as in the description. This was a big fish, probably somewhere close to 14 inches. That was his spot, just kind of hung out over there. This next tank, the Anableps, the 4-eyed fish, it doesn't actually have 4 eyes. It has 2 eyes, but 2 pupils in each eye, hanging out near the top. They can grow up to a foot. These ones were probably somewhere in the 5 to 6 inch range. I just thought they were interesting fish, kind of hanging out. I know that they are sometimes found in the hobby, but they're relatively uncommon. But it was just kind of, they just kind of hung out there. They were peaceful, cool looking display. This was a really cool tank. This was a rather large discus display tank. Up towards the top, we've got some black skirt tetras hanging out along with some neons. We've got some pencil fish in here as well. And I really liked this tank. It was big. It was a tall tank. If I had to guess, probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 300 gallons or so. And the discus looked absolutely fantastic. One of the things that we talked about in the previous video when we were doing the Asian display tank was how the lighting was done throughout all of these displays. It was rather subdued lighting, and that really made the fish look like they were comfortable in their surroundings. And believe it or not, the way the lighting was, it really showed off the colors of the fish, probably better than if the lights had been on the brighter side. So this tank had somewhere, I think it was 3 or 4 discus. They all looked really, really good, had great color. And then they had, of course, the other types of South American fish, smaller ones, in this tank as well. We could see here we've got some cory cats, which was a nice look. There was probably at least a dozen in here, if not more, kind of hanging out. There were some bristlenose plecos. One of the first videos we ever did was a species profile on bristlenose plecos. So it's an older video, but if you want more information on them, I will be sure to put that in the description below as well. Really cool fish. I am sure they are primarily responsible for keeping this tank clean, and they do a relatively good job of that, at least in our fish tanks. We have them in almost all of our tanks, and they do a really good job there as well. But these discus were definitely the star of this tank, as you would imagine, with a discus display tank. Just the colors were phenomenal. You could see some rummy nose tetras in there as well. Nice looking fish. Here we see some cardinal tetras, and they were grouped together relatively tightly, but I wouldn't say they were schooling a lot. This is the view of the top of the tank, and one of the things, again, I liked about that was you had different fish at different levels. Here you see a lot of the cory cats. They're really goofy fish. If you haven't had them in the past, they stay relatively small, a couple inches, and they are really amusing to watch. They kind of hang out with one another. Sometimes they'll make a big cory cat pile in one part of the tank. Very communal sort of fish. Here we get a better look at the rummy nose and the bristlenose plecos. I like rummy nose a lot. I think they're a very underrated fish. Sometimes some people have a hard time keeping them alive, but they're a cool fish. Here we've got the archer fish. I like these. They kind of spit water in nature, looking for insects at the top of the water surface, and they'll spit water up there and try to knock them down. This was another rather large display tank, probably somewhere in the neighborhood of a couple 100 gallons or so. They really used a lot of circular tanks, and in my mind, it seemed to provide the fish, they just seemed to move more in a circular tank, like they had somewhere to go. Here's some piranha. I haven't kept piranha in a very, very long time. I didn't find them to be very interesting. Usually they're quite stationary, but again, here in this circular tank, they seem to move around a little bit more. They like dim lights. This last tank is a different continent. This is Africa. This was a Lake Tanganyika display tank. Again, the size of this tank was probably somewhere in that 300-gallon range. It was a large cylindrical tank. You got some very large frontosa. Frontosa in this tank, if I had to guess, were probably somewhere around a foot or so. Certainly more mature fish. There were, I believe, 3 of them in this tank. A couple of them were hiding in that central kind of structure that you see there. It's probably not the most appropriate scape for a Lake Tanganyika setup, but the fish seemed to enjoy it. They seemed secure. They seemed like they were perfectly fine in their new surroundings. This is a Julidochromis mallory. These are really cool fish. Love the colors on these a lot. Camera's having a little bit of a hard time picking it up, but these are really wonderful fish. And what was kind of cool in this tank is I actually saw some babies from a lot of the fish in this tank. The Julidochromis, they had babies kind of hanging out in the rocks. Really pretty fish. I also saw they had some daffodil pulcher that you can see here. I like these fish. They're kind of like Burchardi, except they get more yellow in the fins. They get a little bit more of a nuchal hump. They can be a little bit more aggressive, but they're really cool fish. And they had some babies kind of hanging out, and I think we get them on camera a couple times, some of the babies. But I thought it was interesting that fish were breeding in this tank. And it's a large tank with a lot of hiding places, so I would expect that probably to be the case. Really cool mix of fish. Like I said, if it were me setting it up, maybe I'd have a little bit more sand, a little bit more rock work. There you can see a little baby right there. And just a fun tank to watch. They had some Synodontis in this tank that was pretty cool as well. Again, appropriate for Lake Tanganyika. These are really awesome fish. If you've never had them before, they're kind of silly. You can put multiples in a tank. They tend to do well with African cichlids, maybe not necessarily in Mbunas, but certainly in a Lake Tanganyika tank. I've had them in peacock tanks before without any issues. I don't know if I'd necessarily put them with the Mbuna, but they are fish that enjoy the similar water parameters, and they provide a lot of action in the tank, and they are really kind of silly fish. I found if you get a few of them, they tend to come out a little bit more. Sometimes if you only have a couple, they are a little bit more reclusive. Here we've got some Tropheus. I tend to like the young Tropheus with the white spots and the dark, like real dark brown, almost black better. And then you can see an older one there. They lose those spots, at least at the boys I do, and they wind up with this brown color and that one yellow stripe. A lot of times at a pet store, people think they're buying this fish that almost looks like this fish here, with, almost saltwater-like, and then they're kind of disappointed as they grow up and they get that yellow streak and they lose all those spots. So just something to think about. So this was the Lake Tanganyikan and South American setups at the Cleveland Aquarium. And if you enjoyed this video, share, subscribe, and we will see you in the next one.